Welcome to the placement game. Here joined with Alex today. Alex, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Harvey. Look forward to it.
What we normally do with like the introductions is we'll do like a deep dive firstly into your story. So tell me more about not just like how you got into recruitment, but like growing up, going into that phase, transitioning. Because I feel everyone has, especially in recruitment, everyone has a similar story where they sort of fell into the role and like fell into the recruitment space. So yeah, tell me your
Yeah,
story on that.
yeah, definitely. I think it's probably the most famous line in recruitment, isn't it? Everybody fell
Yeah.
into it. I don't think I've ever met somebody who purposely did it, but I'm sure there's people out there. My background's pretty normal. I grew up in like a normal town, just outside of Milton Keynes. Went to school, thought I'd do the normal route of going to sixth form, going to uni. Lasted about not 6 months at sixth form, and then left. Got a job in a call center where I was like basically trying to get insurance quotes. It was like super heavy where you would have to get a minimum amount of quotes a day, otherwise you get fired. And there was a huge
Yeah.
turnover. There was like a whole new team every week. I realized I was quite good at it, like kind of doing the cold calling and stuff. And I had a friend who did recruitment, who was making pretty good money. And I thought this must be able to kind of transition over. So not really an academic kind of route. It was more kind of coming in from just coming straight into the workplace. And then I guess coming on to the recruitment story, I got my first job in recruitment at a big corporate agency. I was there for about 4 years or so, built an engineering desk, and probably a slightly different setup to how most people do it. Normally you come in and ideally have a slightly warm desk. I was building a brand new desk from scratch while figuring out how to do recruitment at the same time. So it was
Yeah.
quite a big learning. Did that for about 4 years, and probably, as most people who end up starting their own recruitment businesses, realized pretty early on, like I could probably do this myself and not take 10% of the commission. Like I can do it all. So I did that for, I realized that like about 3 or 4 years in. And then I also wanted to kind of work in different industries and things. So I was interviewing with other companies, and I actually got a job offer for another big corporate agency over in America, based in LA, but they wanted me to move over. But my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, couldn't get a visa, so they would only sponsor me and not
Yeah.
her. So obviously, I didn't go ahead of it. But they wanted me to go to LA, and they were starting a new desk where they were basically hiring in San Francisco, but from LA. And they were talking to me about the
That's it.
startup scene and how big of an opportunity it is for there, and they were really going hard on it. And I probably naively, although I was hiring for startups in Milton Keynes, didn't realize how big the ecosystem in San Francisco is, and
Mm.
on the West Coast. So I obviously didn't accept that job, so I couldn't. But I thought I'll try. I had an idea to like maybe could I hire from the UK to over there. So I probably shouldn't have, but I tried to basically validate my idea and finished my work, came home, and was then emailing and trying to cold call and reach out to clients in America just to see if there's any interest. Like, would they
Yeah.
care that somebody's based over here? Got a few bites, had a company come back to me asking me to send terms. I didn't have terms, so I had to like scramble and make some terms. And then COVID happened. So
I see.
everybody's kind of stopped hiring, and I couldn't do it. And I probably realized that maybe I'm getting a bit over my head here and I'm a little bit early for that. So then I went down a different route. I joined a startup agency. So there was probably 7 or 8 of us working there, reporting into the founder. And I could see like day to day of how a company was being ran. We did a lot of hiring over in other countries like the US, Canada, like Asia, and across
Mm.
Europe. So we were hiring from the UK, but in those other places. And I also saw like how invoices were coming in and how they were charging in different currencies. So I spent a couple of years there, kind of seeing how it was ran. And then my wife, but girlfriend at the time, got pregnant, and I applied for a job and got a job at Facebook, basically over 3x my salary overnight
Yeah.
because I needed the money. And then 2 weeks after my daughter was born, I got made redundant from that job, which is like the typical story. And everybody was like worried. My wife was worried, and like weirdly, I thought like I've always been somebody that feels like everything happens for a reason, and I
Mm.
thought this is life telling me like go and do what you want. You've always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And I took the severance money from that and launched this business just over 3 years ago now. So
Cool, man.
quite a long-winded story of how I got to here, but it was
Yeah.
yeah, lots of learnings.
Yeah. No, I feel we have. I'm still like way less experienced than you are within the business game, but like in terms of the dropping out of school, I was in sixth form, was academically a bit stupid, mainly because I just didn't really care about that sort of stuff. But then yeah, dropped out sixth form and then just like put myself in the deep end. I think that's good, that sort of almost university of recruitment, that phase where you're put in the deep end, that sort of really
Yeah.
harsh environment. How much impact do you think that made for the attribution to
Yeah.
success now?
I'm exactly the same. Like I don't know why I even attempted to do sixth form, because I'm really like an in like action person rather than
Yeah,
in theory. I've never been able to learn like from textbooks or anything. I have to like do the thing to be able
yeah, yeah,
to do it. So like it was super challenging. Like, and you have in your head like it's so easy to go out and set up a business. It is really, really hard. Like especially the
yeah,
first few years. It's like, but I think the stuff that you learn and like the challenges of doing it, like you have no choice but to like to make it work basically, especially in my situation. Like I had a kid, I had a mortgage to pay for. There was in
mm,
my mind there was no choice but to make it work. But then that's interesting as well. Like I never built contracts before and had all this stuff of figuring out how to run the logistics of a business. And I've spent a lot of time traveling around the world to meet clients. And like I think you get exposed and you learn a lot quicker by doing stuff. And I think that's the best way. And that's the
yeah,
best thing about being a founder and an entrepreneur, I think, is that
yeah.
you
It's
get
it's
to
about
experience these things by doing it.
it's about putting yourself in situations where you physically have no choice. I think
Yeah.
that's the best way to describe it.
I was going to say that zone where you're a little bit nervous but excited. And so I try and always
Yeah,
keep myself in that space because it's where you grow. And I think if you so cliche, but when you're comfortable, you don't
yeah.
grow. But yeah, I completely
I think
agree.
when you are in an environment where you have a job and you have that like revenue coming in and it is comfortable, I guess
Yeah,
what was it that well for your case, I guess you got made redundant, so you actually didn't have a
yeah.
choice.
I
Yeah,
always wanted to do it. So to say, I've joined that startup agency like to probably think I'll spend a couple of years here and I'll see what it's like. So I was obviously at a corporate agency. I
yeah,
think there was probably maybe 3 or 4,000 employees across the UK. It was like very, very corporate, like it was a full on structure. And then I went to
mm,
join an agency where I was reporting, as I say, into the founder, and there was I think maybe 6 or 7 of us. It was really
yeah,
great, but it was like a completely different environment from that to this. So and I quite enjoyed it. And obviously, there's no processes to follow, and you kind of figure things out. And he got us involved in like new tools and things. So I see how he's experimenting with things. It was obviously very
yeah,
different to the corporate world, but and then yeah, going from. But then I always had in my head like I want to do this myself, but then when my wife was pregnant with our first child, it was more about getting cash in. And
mm,
then when I got made redundant, it was just like it was like life was pushing me down that route.
yeah.
It's going to happen. So I wasn't.
Adds to the story, doesn't it? I
Yeah, I
guess.
mean, I was lucky. I had the severance come in. I mean, the smart person would have probably took the severance, banked it. But I mean,
Yeah,
I worked out I had 6 months worth of runway to make it work, and
there you
it
go.
took me about 4.5 months to make a placement. So it was I
Yeah.
cut it close. But
That's where it's like it's not always the best to be the most logical because when you are a
yeah,
logical thinker, you do think very risk adverse, where
yeah,
you don't really have that risk tolerance. So yeah, that's
yeah,
cool, man. Tell us more about the recruitment agency then. Is it
yeah.
Exeter, isn't it? That's
Exceder. I probably didn't think
Cedar.
of it too well when I did the name. So it's a Spanish word for exceed, basically.
Oh,
That's why
cool.
it's
Yeah.
missing an e. So it's pronounced Exceder technically, but Exceder. I spend a
Yeah.
lot of time in Spain. I love Spain, and my wife will
Nice.
never accept it. We'll move there one day.
We're going
Another
there
reason.
twice in June.
Oh,
Benidorm
amazing.
is going to be a nightmare, and then
Yeah.
Ibiza late June.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah,
Nice. I spend a lot of time in Mallorca, at the south of the island. I
yeah,
love it. I love those Balearics. They're brilliant. If we have,
mm,
I convinced my wife one day to move over. And another reason why I wanted to set the business up, we usually go and spend about 6 weeks there at the end of summer, and
yeah,
like they can go and do whatever, and I work from there. And it's amazing, and we go over there all the time. So,
mm,
but yeah, sorry, I'm on a tangent there. So yeah, Exceeder. So when I worked at that corporate agency, I was I've always hired engineers, but I was hiring for startups, but also smaller businesses, so like SMEs. Then when I went into that startup agency, we was doing a lot of games, but it was engineering again. And then when I left there, I joined Facebook and was hiring engineers. So
mm,
I didn't really have clients to go and start with from day
yeah,
one because I've been working in a different industry and obviously working internally. But I always love working with startups. As I say, when I had that job offer in America, it was working for the SF market. So I thought I'm going to work with startups in some capacity. And I thought
mm,
as a founder, I'd like to work founder to founder rather than going through layers of HR. And more selfishly, I thought I'd probably get paid quicker as well, having
yeah,
shorter payment terms rather than like
yeah,
big
yeah.
60, 90-day cycles with corporate companies. So the goal has always been to work with startups, and we have. But the first kind of 6 months was really about me trying to figure out my market. I basically would reach out to and work with anyone. So the first kind of 6 months, it was just pure cold calling,
Mm,
emails. A lot of people coming back to me saying like, set up a business a month ago. So it was really hard to get that trust. And people would say, have you hired for somebody in San Francisco before? And I probably, again, naively said no, but I've done all these hires in Milton Keynes. And obviously somebody in the Bay Area isn't going to care about somebody hiring somebody in this area. So I guess luckily I ended up working with a company over in Frankfurt, and as I was kind of running out of cash, I decided to do like an embedded model. So we did like a monthly thing rather than a typical contingency. Built a team there for them, and it kind of spiraled from there. I met another founder in Amsterdam, built a team for them, and then I started working with a company that was came out of Y Combinator. Made a couple of hires for them, and realized I really liked that particular area. So Y Combinator, if people don't know, is like the biggest startup accelerator based out in San Francisco. They've been going since 2005, and like companies like Airbnb, Stripe, Reddit, Twitch have come out of there. It's a huge deal in the startup space, and they do batches each year. And the founder I worked with recommended me to another founder in YC, and then I filled a job for them. And then I kind of like started going down that area. And I don't just work with companies in YC, but predominantly since then, for the last 2.5 years, it's been working with companies in that space. And it's building out early stage teams. To answer your question, like pre-seed, usually to Series A. So it's like the first 5, 10, 15 hires is kind of my speciality. So founders who have maybe just raised, just built a product, and they don't have a recruitment team or anything. So I'm coming in, and I like to see myself more as an advisor rather than like a traditional transactional CV recruiter. So I like to go in there and shape processes, design interviews processes with them, basically build out the whole function, especially if they're first time founders and maybe they've hired within a company but not for their own startup. They might not understand best interview practices, and I can come in and say like, hey, I built these 5 teams in the last 6 months, and this is the best way we're doing it. This is the best way to get hold of these talent, and this is the best way to have a candidate experience. So it's more about coming in and being an advisor rather than like a typical transactional recruiter.
That consultation part is like, it's really important. Not enough people do that. They just focus on like the CV stuff. And that's another way in which it like separates you from your entire market, I guess. How valuable would you say that is to your clients?
Definitely. And I think especially with the rise of AI, like if people aren't, if recruiters aren't doing that in some aspects, I mean, in 5-10 years, you might not have an industry to be a part of. I'm not super subscribed to the whole recruitment world is going to be replaced by AI, but there is a lot of, especially top of funnel stuff that can be replicated by AI. So I think the value that I bring really, and we can kind of touch on it in a moment about certain clients I work with. I want to come in, and I have the luxury now, I'm more established, to be a bit more picky with who I work with, and I like to spend a lot of time with them and work over the long term. I mean, I've just been working with a company, for example, that I've been hiring for the last 2 years, made 14 hires. So that's kind of the level of companies I want to work with. So coming in and being an advisor and understanding like the market. And I come up against a lot of recruiters sometimes that maybe work with startups and like 5,000 person companies, and it's a completely different world. Like just identifying that candidate, obviously qualifying them, but then also being able to like actually match and make sure that the founders are hiring. And sometimes founders have really unrealistic expectations, or rightly or wrongly, if they've come from like a Google, they think they need to interview that way, and like they miss out on talent. People drop out of the interview process halfway through, and if you just tell them, oh, I'll find you another CV, you're not actually addressing the problem, and it's going to take 3 months for them to make a hire, and they need to develop the product, and so you need to come in and really be that expert and that advisor.
Almost like a partnership. I see that as the best way to do business. Them longer term relationships. We were briefly speaking prior in terms of seeing the industry going down more of like a transactional route. One of the reasons why I even started this podcast was just to build relationships with people. My sort of sales paradigm, my philosophy is I actually don't have anything to sell, which sounds stupid, but it is purely, my goal is just to build as big as a network as possible, and things come from that. And the other thing as well is when you go about with that, every single person that I've worked with has ended up into like a longer term or a longer partnership because they trust me to a level where they can commit to something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially at your age, I mean, I wish when I was younger that I thought about that more, and especially with you working for yourself, you can do that. When I worked for companies, like you would build contacts, but I mean, like I don't ever speak to any of like candidates or clients that I did 10 years ago when I was working at that corporate agency, because like you just don't. And like now the past 3 years, it compounds so much. People know people, you get referrals out of nowhere. It's crazy. It's who you know. It really is. It's a like typical saying, but it's who you know.
It's that thinking long term. Some people like with the short term gratification that they're more direct selling, they just want the money and it's very
Yeah,
transactional. But when you are in it for the long run, it's like, yeah, money's good, but it's just a bonus to sort
yeah,
of building longer term relationships. And that's the thing, it's like building these relationships, business is a bonus. That's how I see it.
yeah.
So yeah.
Definitely. And just to add to that as well, I had a client that I built some of their team for, and I used to go and spend some time in the office with them because I work with founders, and being a
Mm.
business person myself, the working with founders, I get to go in and see, and obviously they're on a
Yeah.
huge, bigger scale than me. They're raising tens of millions of dollars and building these big products and getting to like hundreds of millions in AAR. But like seeing them operate in person, a lot of them, especially repeat founders, like I go and like do some interviews for them, but being in the room and see like them come in with the buzz, like we need
Yeah.
to build this feature, and it's like shit, like seeing how these businesses operate is crazy, and like being there and like just obviously I went there to do the work and be alongside them, and it helped with interviews and things. But like subconsciously, I didn't even think about it. There was like some of their staff there, and naturally, people in
Mm.
those companies end up going and start their own companies because if you join a startup as an early
Yeah.
engineer or an early person in general, you end up going to start your own company. And somebody left that company and reached out to me about a year later, and then I hired their team, building a
Yeah.
founding team for them. So it's like it really is about network, especially in certain areas,
100%.
which is why I think some recruiters should specifically work in one niche. Like when
Yeah.
recruiters work across different areas, it really doesn't work because you need to become
Yeah.
in that space.
The network for me has been, I guess, the biggest part. It's like we're in like an entrepreneurship network, me and my brother. It's not like about recruitment, but
Yeah,
I've always had that concept of like trying to put myself in rooms that I don't deserve to be in, and
yeah,
like being the smallest in that room. And like it sounds really weird, but me and my brother, we would go to like property events when we're like he would be like 15 and I'd be like 14. Well, he'd be like 16, I'd be like 14. Everyone's like looking at us like, what the hell are you guys doing?
yeah.
But it was funny because we felt like we didn't deserve to be there and we didn't because we
Mm.
didn't know what was going on. I really get that concept of just trying to put yourself
Yeah.
into rooms you don't deserve to be in.
I love that, and especially like with me, and same for you, I guess, as well, not going to university, and like
Mm.
while I'm not a huge fan, I think especially for like like recruiters and things, if you go to university,
Yeah.
great, but I think there's a lot of cases where it's not justified. But obviously, I work with engineers and stuff, so there's a lot of them well, the bulk of them have like computer science degrees and stuff, and I'm in rooms with founders and engineers who are like Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale,
Yeah.
the Wharton School grads, and I'm just there with like a few GCSEs, and I think to myself all the time in these rooms, like how have I turned up
Yeah.
in this room? But it's like you feel almost like a bit of a imposter, but again, that is so a sign show that you're growing and you're meant to be there. So
100%.
I
You
always try
said
and
about
put
that.
myself in there.
You said about that practical versus like theoretical.
Yeah,
People aren't like people in uni. They're really struggling to get jobs, even with all their
yeah,
degrees. And it is actually a case with my brother. So we have like a contracting role in a huge AI consultancy, and they were looking for people who don't have any degrees, don't barely have any GCSEs, and actually have just gone out and done it themselves in terms of like
yeah,
the business development side of things. So they weren't hiring people with like uni degrees. They were just looking for people who had gone and done it themselves and had that
yeah,
initiative to go out and do it. And yeah, I think you learn a lot more when you just go into the deep end and just fail.
yeah.
Like our first two
Oh, for
years of
sure.
business was just
Yeah,
failure after failure. But yeah, I guess that's where the real
yeah.
growth is.
Oh, for sure. And I hire, funny enough, a lot of a lot of the placements I make for founding engineers are also
Mm.
ex-founders, and they
Yeah,
love it because you've gone out and done it yourself. And I think I've noticed this a lot from working with companies and spending a time over in the US and working with candidates and clients over there.
yeah,
Like the mentality over there is something I wish we had over here in the UK. When I started this business and like the first like a little bit, like people were like, "You sure? Like it's a bit risky. Why don't you just take that money and go do it?"
yeah.
Whereas over in the US, it's like you're going to fail, but you learn, and
Mm.
it's a lot more promoted over there to go out and try and fail, and it's
Yeah,
seen as like almost like I guess a pathway to success. You need to fail, whereas here it's like don't fail, and if you do, it's embarrassing. It's like
yeah,
it's a really different mindset shift to over there. But I think the only way you learn it is by doing it. Especially for me, it's you have to be thrown
100%.
in there.
I'm quite lucky because I don't think well I was a bit stupid in school, but my brother, he was like the first one to get me involved in it all. So I'm lucky to have him, and he just said to me like when we first started, he just said to me, even if we fail for like the next 10 years,
Yeah.
we will have so much knowledge in that 10 years to go and make
Oh,
like
definitely.
the success of it.
And the way I looked at it when I got that redundancy, I thought I'm either going to burn through this cash and then I get a job in 7 months, or
Yeah,
I get another job and then regret it forever. Like
yeah,
this, you can always go
that's,
back to doing it. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, going on from that, is it just you at Exceeder, or do you have like a team working for you?
yeah, so it's just me. I guess again, naively, I went into this thinking like I'm going to start hiring people and have a huge
Yeah,
team. And I'm just over 3 years in, and I probably when I first set up thinking I'd have quite a big team now. And I had one sourcer once, like last year for a few months that came on to help with the contract. But I quite like it being just me, and I've kind of I guess come to peace with it's going to be me for a while. And a lot
yeah,
of the referrals I get are more for me rather than the company. And I go in and I work with founders based on my knowledge. So for the
mm,
time being, it's probably going to be me. And especially with the rise of AI, like there's so much you can do in terms of especially sourcing and top of funnel to kind of buy back
mm,
your time
yeah.
on that side of things. So
Yeah,
it is just me at the moment.
I think a lot of recruitment founders out there, they believe that the only way to scale and get past that ceiling of growth that they're currently at is to hire more. I feel when you hire more and you don't have like a foundation of leverage built in, it's just scaling stress. And I guess managing people, like the cultural stuff behind it as well, it's almost like another job.
It completely is, and so I say I like the freedom where I can kind of go and work from wherever I want, and spend if
Yeah.
I want to go spend a week in another country and go do that without having to come and manage the team in person.
Yeah.
But even companies I'm hiring for, I've noticed a lot of companies aren't hiring as many engineers because the use of AI, one engineer can do the job of like three these days, and it's the same
Yes.
in other areas. So if you're leveraging AI, you definitely can, and it's obviously then
100%.
your profit stays higher as well because you've not got
Yeah.
outgoings for headcount.
One thing that you said there as well is like people buy into you, right?
Mm.
And it's almost like that access tier. They're buying for you, not for like a team that you have.
Yeah.
I my sort of background prior to this, we had a coaching business where we were
Mm.
like mentoring people on how to like scale their personal brands. And looking back now, we've brought into a ton of mentorships, we've brought into a ton of programs, and the only reason for buying into it had quite obviously it had to do with their product and what they were selling, but a lot more about actually who they were as a person and buying into them.
Mm.
People buy into you as a person. Another question as well is,
Yeah.
do you guys have a brand online? Do you
Yeah.
like market for
So I
your
have like the website, I've got a logo and all that stuff and everything. But I guess I've probably maybe pigeonholed myself into that where like the
yeah,
value is with me because like I'm maybe going and making a dozen hires for one company and then like I'm coming in and say like I've just hired the whole team doing exactly what you're doing. Like
mm,
the experience comes with me. So rather than I guess like the company coming in and making those hires, because it's not like one-off hires, it's probably 95% of the companies I've hired for have been at least more than one, and I like to go over the long
mm,
term. So it's me coming in, bringing my experience. So it's almost like
yeah,
I guess like a partner in that sense. So the company has a brand, but I completely agree with your point there as well. In the early days, I mean, I worked with everyone and anyone because I kind of had no
mm,
choice to get cash through the door. But I'm in the luxury now of being able to be a bit more picky, a bit more choosy. And I think that's really important, not just selfishly for me coming in and having to enjoy doing what I'm doing every day
yeah,
and that side of things. But I think I spend a lot of time with these clients, especially in the early days. And like there has to be some sort of trust there as well, for one, because I'm coming in and I'm telling you how to spend your millions that you've just
mm,
raised and how to hire and how to do things in your
yeah,
business. So there has to be that trust there. But we're spending a lot of time together and like I want to enjoy what I'm doing and I want to kind of get enjoyment out of it. Like it's
yeah,
the whole point of that. And for me to give my best work is to do that. So it doesn't make sense for me to come in and be miserable to working with clients.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I've got the luxury these days where I'm a bit more choosy. I'll go in and I'll meet clients. If it doesn't feel right, not even for like the financials and terms, if I don't feel like I'm going to gel with that person, I don't
yeah,
want to dedicate a few months or even a few years spending like maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week doing kind of work with
yeah,
them. So I think
yeah,
that's super important and it helps give you the energy. And I'm sure probably the same for you. Like if you work with
100%.
somebody you don't like, it sucks the energy out
Oh,
of
mate.
you. So
We've been in some bad situations previously where obviously the thoughts on partnering long term with people, yeah, it's great. And then there's been times where we've actually partnered with them and we
yeah,
haven't built up that trust enough and not actually realizing who they are as a
yeah,
person. And yeah, it doesn't really go well. So really get to know them before you actually do business and get them to know you as well. I think
yeah,
that's obviously more important. But yeah, I
definitely,
mean, it's a big commitment to partner with someone, and
definitely.
within this industry, it's very transactional. It's almost impossible to build up a relationship for people to
Yeah.
like commit long term over like an email sent or like a cold outbound message that people
Yeah.
is the way.
I agree. And I think especially with again coming from a corporate agency background, it's all about those headline numbers. Like how many calls have you made today? How many
Yeah.
CVs have you sent? How many interviews have you got? How are you getting X amount of money at the end of the month? And like you end up doing one placement here and there and here and there. And I'd rather do like obviously it sounds stupid saying out loud, but I'd rather do 10 placements over the space of a year than 10 placements of one with other companies. So
Yeah.
I'd rather take my time a little bit more to find a client. Like sometimes I'm between projects for a few weeks because like as I say, I'd rather go in and work with somebody that I enjoy working with, that I can see a long-term vision. So I think it's super important. And like if you're not enjoying what you're doing, then it's obviously not fun, but it's easier said than done. Obviously in the earlier days when you need to get some sort of foundation, you kind of have to deal with it. But then you also learn as well, working with people who might be a little bit harder to deal with. You learn the skills to kind of, I guess, convince them. And as I say, especially in this world, if you're working with, like sometimes I work with CEOs that have had 3-4 companies, and like I've worked with people who have sold companies for tens of millions. So like you need to get that, I guess, skin in the game to be able to convince them. So you need to do that. But certainly these days, I think the luxury, and again, another reason why I quite like being at Just Me is because then I can have that luxury of picking and choosing who I work with.
100%, man, 100%. Yeah, I think that generalist versus specialist is really important. You're also, I guess, perceived as much more valuable when you're a specialist. I guess the most important thing is someone's perception of you and how valuable you are. And it's like that. I'm gonna absolutely butcher this, but you wouldn't go to a doctor's to get your teeth done. You'd go to like a dentist because it's more niche and specialist, or like you wouldn't go to A&E to have your brain surgery, or you go to a brain surgeon.
Of course. And it helps with your own confidence as well to be able to go in. I mean, I was like nervous. I still get days where I'm nervous, but like when I was first walking into buildings and like I'm hiring for these companies that have just raised 20 million, whereas now I can go in and say, I've done so many of these hires, exactly what you need. You go in and you have the confidence to say to somebody like, your interview process is, it's not good enough. You need to do this, you need to do that. This is why you're losing candidates. I met a client a couple of months ago, and they've been trying to fill a role for 7 or 8 months, and they've been working with 5 or 6 recruiters. And I asked, like, where are people falling off? How many people are falling off at this stage and whatever? And they didn't know. And it was like, when we looked through it all, it's like, because candidates are just sending so many people, they're saying, oh, they're not a fit, but then they're not understanding why, or the process was too long, people were dropping off towards the end, so we tightened up, took spaces out. So there's like, and then you're able to make hires quickly. So if you're able to come in and have the confidence to do that, so I think it's all about doing it more and more. And
100%. Well, you said it there. It's like doing more and more. Not having the confidence is just like a lack of preparation in terms of it's just not enough reps, right? That is purely.
Obviously, you have to throw yourself in those situations to get that, so it's going to feel scary at the start. But once you've been in it a few times, like you definitely get the confidence.
When we first started this, I'd never done a cold call ever in my life, and I was absolutely bricking it to just speak to someone about what we're offering. Like it literally, like you have so much nerve about it. So now it's just nothing, right? It's just a sales call, because you have that confidence on not just what to say, but you have the confidence of rejection, because you're going to get a lot of rejection, and I think that also builds up confidence as well.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, you can have the best service in the world. It's like catch people at the right time. People might not want to work for me. I mean, I've been doing this 10 years, and my favorite part of the job is doing, like, meeting new clients, going to see people in person. I travel quite a bit, and I go into London quite a lot to meet people. I mean, even when I'm meeting people for the first time, it's going to be a few little butterflies and things. Yeah. But again, I think that's a sign that you're kind of nervous but excited in that growth zone. So
it just means that you care, really, doesn't it? I guess.
Definitely. And you obviously want to go in and make a good impression and stuff, but that's the most exciting part for me. The sourcing and interviewing and stuff, you do the same thing thousands of times over the course of 10 years, but it's definitely the most exciting thing. And there's so much to compete with as well, and people getting calls and emails, like there's so much noise and things. So I think the default from people, especially on cold calls, are like to really push you away, so it's hard to do it.
Mate, the cold calling is a struggle. It is good for killing your ego, and just purely just getting rejected after like
I don't know if you've ever worked like in an office, but like I used to have to work in offices, and before I started doing recruitment, I worked in a call center doing the insurance quotes, and we'd have to do like 120 calls a day, and people would swear at you and all sorts. And when you're in there, you kind of feel the buzz of everyone else doing it. And I remember when I first started doing this, like, I rented a little office space. I was in my private office. I'm cold calling people off my phone, and I felt even more nervous because I'm in there on my own. It's like you don't get that environment to
Yeah.
buzz you in. So I felt, even though
Yeah.
I was 7 years into my recruitment journey, I'd made thousands of cold calls. I was like, the silence made it
Yeah.
harder
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, listen, this has been like a really valuable episode. There's a lot of value in here. I feel like I can relate with you, even though you're way ahead of me. I feel like we can relate at I guess, the start of our journeys. And yeah, what you're doing is amazing. I
Thank
guess the
you.
next question is, what's the vision? Not
Mm.
just for the business. After that, what's the vision
Yeah.
in recruitment as a whole, as like an industry?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. I think I'm really enjoying kind of I think I want to double down more into like more embedded kind of stuff, coming in and doing like big longer term projects and being more an
Yeah.
advisor. So it is in that space. I think eventually maybe I would like to hire somebody, I guess, because right now it's, although it obviously is a business, it is really just me. So like if I don't
Yeah.
turn up for the day,
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't keep operating. So maybe in that space, I maybe envision myself doing something in like like the venture backed ecosystem, whether that's like somehow later down the line investing into companies and stuff. Obviously, I speak to a lot of VCs these days as well. Founders introduce me, and kind of the other way around. So like maybe somehow putting cash into that space, or being more involved in that, in the area of going and doing talks and things and giving back to that space. And
Yeah.
been trying to figure out a way I can maybe go and like share some of my knowledge, not want any payment for it, but like go and speak to
Yeah.
founders that maybe are younger and they're wanting to start companies, like how to interview, and how to figure out
Mm.
like what a good CV looks like. Maybe go out and be more in that ecosystem rather than just
Yeah.
working with companies. So in that space, but I'm still figuring it out. I'm enjoying kind of not winging it, but I'm figuring it out as it goes along. I think that's the best part. Long term, I'd love to move to Spain one day and
Yeah.
still operate from there. But I enjoy the kind of figure out as it comes,
Yeah.
and planning out from that space. But what about you guys? Do you see yourself becoming a big person company?
Um, yeah, I don't know. Obviously the goal is just to build up like the business and then exit later down the line and
Yeah.
just live off of that. But yeah, I mean, I do want to build a legacy. I mean, this is very like long-term thinking, but like you
Mm.
said, in terms of not just doing recruitment, but going into the info space and helping people and consulting people who
Mm.
may like need your advice. That's the goal. I want to get a shit ton of results with this,
Yeah.
scale that, and then like build the credibility up, and then go back into that info space. Because I think we did it the wrong way around. We started consulting on something that
Yeah.
we hadn't actually proven. We were getting really good results and we're doing really well, but end of going into this year, we realized, okay, like thinking long term, this is what we need to do. Get the
Yeah.
credibility, like a lot more credibility, and then selling info, I guess. That's the
Yeah.
most profitable market. That's where businesses properly scale, where they go into that info space and sell what they know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as mentioned, like the more people you meet in that space, just naturally, it's just going to compound from there. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was amazing speaking to you. Thanks so much for
100%,
having me
Alex.
on.
Yeah, really appreciate your time, man. And obviously we'll keep in contact. But
Yeah,
I guess that's a good way to wrap it up as well. So have a good rest of
cool.
your day, mate, and see you
Yeah,
later.
thank you.